The cafeteria at Naval Special Warfare Training Center was alive with the noise of hundreds of young recruits. Laughter bounced off the beige walls, trays clattering, the smell of reheated chicken and beans filling the air. It was lunchtime. But for many of these recruits, it was also a battlefield in miniature, a place to assert dominance, prove toughness, or quietly measure one another's weaknesses. In the middle of this organized chaos sat a woman alone, a figure that went almost unnoticed at first. She was unassuming, her uniform neat, but without the extra insignias or the telltale signs of higher rank. Her hair was pulled into a tight bun, her posture straight but unpretentious, and her hands moved with quiet precision as she cut her food and ate deliberately. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keaton was her name, though most around her did not know it yet. To the recruits, she appeared like any other person who had wandered into their midst, a quiet newcomer, maybe a misplaced staffer, or an administrative trainee. She didn't laugh at their jokes, she didn't throw back sarcastic quips, and she didn't respond to the stares that occasionally darted in her direction. Her focus seemed to be entirely on her meal, on the rhythm of cutting and chewing, and on something beyond the cafeteria walls, something none of them could see. It didn't take long for the first whispers to start. Young, brash voices, filled with nervous bravado, began to speculate about the quiet woman in the corner. "Look at her. Doesn't even talk," one whispered. "She's probably scared out of her mind," said another, smirking. "Wonder how long she's been here," Reed said, leaning back in his chair with a grin. "Maybe 5 minutes? 10? Doesn't even have the guts to talk to anyone." The group's attention soon coalesced around Sarah. They began nudging one another, pointing subtly, laughing under their breath. Reed, the most audacious of the lot, decided to escalate. He slid his tray over and leaned slightly toward her table. "Hey, new girl," he said, loud enough for others to hear. "You lost or something?" His voice carried the practiced arrogance of someone accustomed to testing boundaries and getting laughs in return. The other recruits snickered nervously, glancing around to see if anyone else was noticing this interaction. Sarah looked up slowly. Her eyes were sharp, her gaze direct, unflinching. She did not blink rapidly or jerk back, nor did she look away. For a moment, silence stretched like a taut wire. Then, in a voice as calm as still water, yet edged with authority, she said, "You've got 60 seconds to walk away." A ripple of laughter went through the table, the kind of laughter that said, "She's joking." "Relax." Reed chuckled and leaned in closer, the smirk on his face widening. "Or what?" He jeered, clearly expecting her to flinch or retreat. "Or what?" he repeated, louder this time, drawing glances from the surrounding tables. Some recruits leaned in, curious to see how the quiet woman would respond, thinking this was just harmless cafeteria banter. But Sarah did not move backward. She did not twitch. Instead, she set down her fork deliberately and slowly rose to her feet, the movements fluid and precise, like someone who had spent years refining every gesture. The other recruits sensed the shift almost instinctively. The room's energy subtly changed. The laughter died down, replaced by a low hum of tension, an almost imperceptible pause, as if the air itself was holding its breath. A sergeant walked past the row of tables, his eyes narrowing slightly as he observed the interaction. He did not intervene. He knew who she was. He knew what she had accomplished, and he was content to watch the scene unfold. There was a faint, almost imperceptible smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Let them see. Let them realize. Sarah's voice cut through the tension again, soft but deliberate. 10 seconds. The clock on the wall ticked almost in sync with the beat of the recruit's collective heartbeat. Reed's smirk faltered just a fraction. He glanced around at the silent observers. Some were wide-eyed, others frozen mid-laugh. Even the bustling servers behind the counters seemed to slow. sensing that something extraordinary was unfolding in what appeared to be an ordinary lunch break. Reed, never one to back down, squared his shoulders and took a step closer. "You really think you can?" he began, and then paused. His words faltered. There was something in her eyes now, a quiet steel that seemed to measure him, weigh him, and find him wanting. It wasn't anger. It wasn't fear. It was absolute certainty, honed by countless hours of training, discipline, and unspoken experiences. 3 seconds, she whispered, almost inaudibly. The recruit's laughter, once brash and confident, vanished completely. A thin bead of sweat traced down Reed's temple. For the first time in his short military life, he felt the cold, creeping realization that he had misjudged the situation entirely. Sarah shifted her stance with the subtle grace of someone who had trained their body and mind to move in perfect harmony. It was no longer just a verbal warning. It was a demonstration of controlled power, a silent promise of consequences. Reed's hand twitched involuntarily, his eyes darting around for backup, but the other recruits were frozen. None moved. Some gripped the edges of their trays, knuckles white. Others simply stared, mouths slightly agape, unable to comprehend the sheer presence emanating from the woman in the corner. Then, with the precision of a seasoned operator, Sarah moved. In an instant that felt slower than reality, she shifted, her body positioning Reed's arm, controlling him without effort, without aggression. His tray crashed to the floor, scattering food across the linoleum, and the entire cafeteria seemed to exhale collectively at the sound. Sarah held him there just long enough for the point to sink in. Then she released him gently, her tone even but commanding. "Next time, think before you corner someone." The room was silent. One napkin fluttered to the ground, unnoticed except by the sergeant observing from across the room. Reed rubbed his wrist, shock and disbelief washing over him. His pride stung far more than any physical discomfort. Around him, recruits whispered urgently, trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Who is she?" one asked quietly. Another muttered, "She's a SEAL, isn't she?" The sergeant finally spoke, his voice carrying authority and amusement. "Gentlemen, meet Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keaton, United States Navy SEAL. And yes, she's the one you've read about in the briefings, the one whose missions you've only heard in stories." Gasps spread across the room. The weight of her presence, the truth of her identity, sank in like a tidal wave. For some recruits, their bravado evaporated entirely. For others, it was the first moment they truly understood what discipline, courage, and skill looked like unadorned, quiet, and unassuming. Sarah, unbothered by the attention, collected her tray and walked away, moving with the ease of someone who had long since mastered herself. The chatter of the cafeteria slowly returned, but the tone had shifted. Respect had replaced mockery. Curiosity had replaced ignorance. And for the recruits, one lesson would remain etched forever. Never judge someone by silence, for it may conceal the most formidable strength imaginable. 60 seconds. That was all it had taken. The noise of the cafeteria had returned, but it was different now, muted, charged with an undercurrent of disbelief. The recruits who had moments ago laughed and cheered at the quiet woman were now huddled in small clusters, glancing over their shoulders at Sarah as she walked away. Her movements were deliberate, each step measured, purposeful, and yet calm, like a predator that had no need to hurry. Every eye in the room followed her, a mixture of awe and confusion spreading like wildfire. Who was she? How could one person, seemingly ordinary at first glance, control a man without striking him, simply with precision and quiet authority? Reed sat frozen in his chair, still rubbing his wrist, his pride fractured, but his respect blossoming. He had always considered himself tough, someone who could handle a confrontation. Yet in 60 seconds, in less than a minute, The quiet woman had appended everything he thought he knew about strength. His usual bravado had evaporated, replaced by annoying awareness of his own limitations. He stared after her, eyes wide, jaw clenched, and a single thought reverberated in his mind. I just got schooled by a seal. Around him, whispers continued to ripple through the cafeteria. One recruit leaned over to another, voice barely above a murmur. Did you see that? She didn't even sweat. Another replied, voice shaking slightly. I think she's one of those legends. The ones we hear about in briefings, but never actually see. A third added, if that's true. She just humiliated us, without even trying. The collective realization was settling in. The woman they had mocked, the one they had underestimated, was not just a soldier. She was something else entirely. The sergeant, who had been silently observing, crossed the room and placed a hand on Reed's shoulder. That's Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keaton, he said, voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. She's a Navy SEAL, Reed, Team 7, one of the finest operators you'll ever hear about. And right now, you're looking at someone whose skill and discipline saved lives in situations you can't even imagine. Reed's face paled further. His hand trembled slightly as he processed the words. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. Sarah's tray clinked lightly against the metal countertop as she approached the exit. She did not turn back. Her silence was not arrogance, it was deliberate. Her eyes scanned the room, but her focus was inward, a calm confidence that came from years of experience. She had faced far worse than cafeteria taunts, far more dangerous situations than a room full of nervous, inexperienced recruits. And yet, she knew that even this small lesson mattered. Respect and discipline could be taught in moments like these, and she was always attentive to opportunities for instruction, whether anyone realized it or not. As she passed through the doorway, a hush fell over the cafeteria. A few recruits tried to laugh again, attempting to reclaim their bravado, but the laughter sounded hollow, even forced. The reality of what had just happened pressed down on them like a physical weight. Reed, still seated, realized that the embarrassment he felt was mingled with something unfamiliar admiration. The way Sarah had moved, the calm in her voice, the unshakable confidence, it all spoke of experience far beyond anything he had yet encountered. He began to wonder what other challenges she had faced, what battles she had fought, and what sacrifices she had made to reach this point. Outside the cafeteria, Sarah walked down the narrow corridor toward the training grounds. Her boots clicked rhythmically on the polished linoleum floor, each step echoing with quiet authority. She did not hurry, but neither did she meander. Her mind was calm, methodical, reflecting on the subtle lessons that came from the encounter. Every recruit had a choice in that moment: fight, flee, or learn. Some had laughed, some had jeered, some had hesitated. Only a few had understood immediately. She had no illusions. Most would take months, perhaps years, to truly comprehend the weight of her presence and what it represented. As she reached the doors leading outside, she paused and glanced back briefly. The cafeteria windows offered a clear view of the stunned recruits inside. Some were whispering among themselves, pointing subtly, trying to reconstruct the events they had just witnessed. Reed, still seated, finally rose, his face a mixture of humility and curiosity. He stared in awe at her retreating figure, the reality settling in that he had just encountered a living legend. The sergeant approached him, voice low but firm. "Lesson 1 read," he said, "is that strength is often quiet. You never know what a person can do until you respect their space, their focus, and their skill. That's why SEALs like Keaton exist. They teach by example, not by shouting." Reed nodded slowly, swallowing his pride. For the first time, he understood that there were battles far more important than cafeteria, bravado battles of discipline. courage, and self-control. Sarah stepped outside into the brisk afternoon air. The base's training field stretched ahead, a landscape of sand, obstacles, and endless drills. She inhaled deeply, savoring the moment of calm after the storm of the cafeteria. For her, every day was a lesson in control, focus, and preparation. Yet she recognized the small victories in teaching young recruits a lesson they would never forget. Respect was earned, not demanded. Silence was not weakness, it was power waiting to be understood. Her mind drifted briefly to her past, to the countless hours of training that had honed her into the operator she had become. She remembered the freezing waves of Coronado Beach, the endless physical punishments, the pain that never truly left, and the moments when giving up would have been easier than continuing. She remembered each failure as a step toward mastery, each injury as a lesson in perseverance, and each doubt as a challenge to overcome. Those experiences had forged her into someone who could handle far more than a cafeteria confrontation, and yet even this small encounter mattered. Reed and the other recruits began to stir inside the cafeteria. Conversations started cautiously, the tension still lingering. "Did you see that?" One whispered. "She didn't even raise her voice." Another added, "She just controlled him effortlessly." Slowly, comprehension dawned across the room. It wasn't just that Sarah had defended herself. It was how she had done it. Precision, control, patience. The recruits realized they had underestimated her, and that realization was humbling. As Sarah moved toward the training grounds, she felt no satisfaction in humiliation or victory. Her lesson had been delivered, her point made. Respect had been earned without force, without anger. For the recruits, the event would linger in memory like a shadow and unspoken standard they would strive to meet. For Sarah, it was a reminder that true strength was often quiet, disciplined, and demonstrated at the exact moment it was most needed. By the time she reached the edge of the training field, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the sand and obstacles. The day would continue with drills, exercises, and endless routines, but a quiet legacy had been left behind in the cafeteria. One that would ripple through the minds of those recruits, shaping their understanding of strength, discipline, and respect for years to come. 60 seconds had passed, but the lesson would last a lifetime. The cafeteria had returned to its usual hum of chatter and clattering trays, yet the atmosphere had irrevocably changed. What had been mere lunch-hour banter and casual competition among recruits now carried a tension that refused to dissipate. Every movement, every glance, every whisper seemed to orbit the quiet, commanding presence of Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keaton, even though she had already walked out. Her brief confrontation had left a ripple, a subtle but undeniable mark that lingered in the minds of every young trainee. Reed sat frozen at his table, his tray still abandoned, half-eaten food forgotten, his wrist rubbing a pale, tense hand. He replayed the sequence over and over in his mind, the precise, almost fluid motion with which Sarah had twisted his arm, the calm in her tone, the way she released him without a hint of aggression, yet left him completely under control. For the first time, he felt the full weight of misjudgment. He had walked in confident, joking with his friends, ready to mock the quiet girl in the corner, and in less than a minute, he had been completely disarmed, not just physically, but psychologically. His pride burned, mingled with awe, as the truth began to settle. Around him, other recruits whispered nervously, exchanging stunned looks. "Did you see that?" One said, barely above a breath. She didn't even try to hit him." Another shook their head. It's like she was already in control before he even realized he was the one being controlled. Eyes darted around, trying to spot authority figures for confirmation, for some explanation of how an ordinary-looking woman could wield such effortless command. It was then that the sergeant, who had been observing from across the room, stepped forward. His heavy boots clicked against the linoleum, each step measured. He approached the cluster of trainees around Reed, and with a calm, firm voice, he spoke words that would etch themselves into their memory forever. "That's Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keaton," he said. "United States Navy SEAL, Team 7, and yes, she just handled that situation with a kind of precision and discipline that most of you will never witness in your careers." The words hit like a tidal wave. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Laughter died completely. Even the kitchen staff, who had briefly paused to glance over, returned to their tasks with an added sense of reverence. For the recruits, disbelief morphed into awe. Sarah Keaton, someone they had dismissed as a timid newcomer, was a living legend. Her identity was not just impressive. It was almost mythical. These were people they had heard about only in briefings or seen in grainy training videos. Her reputation whispered across classified documents and known only to a select few. And now she had walked among them. Reed's face burned with humiliation. He had not only underestimated her, he had been so certain of his own superiority that the crash of his tray had jolted him into awareness. And yet, despite the shame, there was something else bubbling up. Respect. Slowly, begrudgingly, Reed straightened in his chair, a muscle in his jaw twitching as he studied the doorway she had just passed through. Her back was straight, her steps precise, calm, and measured. There was no swagger, no arrogance. She did not turn to gloat, to assert dominance further, or to savor the impact she had left on the room. Everything she did spoke of experience, of discipline, and of a quiet confidence that demanded respect without asking for it. Whispers spread like wildfire. "Did you hear that? SEAL Team 7. The one in Kandahar?" asked one recruit. "The one who rescued a whole squad under fire?" Another responded, voice barely audible. "Yeah. She's the one who carried a wounded operator through the mountains while being shot at." The murmurs grew. Some recruits glanced at the sergeant, seeking confirmation. The sergeant simply nodded slightly, a small smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. Sarah's movements in the hallway had been measured, controlled, but her mind was far from idle. She knew the lesson she had delivered in 60 seconds was subtle but effective. The first impression was often misleading. The quiet could be dismissed, the unassuming overlooked. But the lesson she had just imparted went deeper. Strength is not loud. Authority is not always visible. Discipline is silent. She had no need to yell, no need to demonstrate force beyond what was necessary. And yet, the impact had been immediate. Respect had been earned, and a seed of understanding planted in every recruit who had witnessed the event. Inside the cafeteria, Reed attempted to regain some sense of composure. His friends were equally stunned, and while some tried to make light of the situation, their attempts were hollow, failing against the undeniable reality of what had just happened. He replayed the interaction in his mind, the calm warning, the precise movements, the effortless control, and he realized that his own bravado had blinded him. For the first time, he felt the vast gulf between raw confidence and true mastery. Confidence can intimidate, but mastery commands. And Sarah Keaton had mastered both body and mind. As she exited the building, the sunlight streaming through the doorway highlighted her uniform and the faint insignias that confirmed her rank. Her eyes, calm and unwavering, swept across the training grounds beyond. There was work to do, drills to run, skills to hone, but for now, she allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction. The lesson had been delivered perfectly. It was subtle, precise, and permanent. One could not feign respect after such an encounter. It had to be earned. The recruits slowly regained their footing, moving back to their trays, talking in low, cautious tones. But Reed could not stop staring toward the doorway, his mind racing. She's a seal? A seal? The words repeated in his head, a mantra that refused to fade. He thought of the training videos he had watched, the mission briefings he had only skimmed, the stories whispered among upperclassmen. He realized, with a mixture of awe and fear, that the quiet woman who had defied him in 60 seconds was capable of feats he could barely comprehend. The sergeant placed a firm hand on Reed's shoulder. "Lesson 2, he said quietly, so only Reed could hear, is that humility is earned in moments like these. You can train all you want, but until you learn to respect experience, discipline, and skill, you will never truly understand what it means to be a SEAL. Today, Sarah Keaton taught you more than drills ever could." Reed swallowed, his pride still stinging, but he understood. He had glimpsed the power of mastery, and he had no illusions about underestimating it again. By the time Sarah reached the training grounds, the sun had begun its descent, casting long shadows across the obstacle courses and firing ranges. Her boots hit the pavement with quiet precision. She glanced briefly at the horizon, at the expanse of land that had been her proving ground for years, and a subtle smile tugged at the corner of her mouth. Each encounter, each lesson, even one as brief as 60 seconds, was a part of shaping the next generation. Respect could not be demanded. It had to be shown, and it had to be earned. In the cafeteria, the story of the encounter spread quickly among the recruits who had not witnessed it firsthand. "Did you hear about the new girl?" One whispered. "She's not just any trainee, she's a SEAL." Others nodded, awe and disbelief mingling. The lesson Sarah had imparted, the quiet strength, the controlled authority, the patience to teach without anger, resonated in every corner of the room. They would remember it forever, not because of what she had done physically, but because of the presence she carried, the silent power she exuded, and the undeniable proof of mastery they had seen in 60 seconds. 60 seconds. That was all it had taken to transform the perception of an entire group of young recruits. A lesson in strength, respect, and humility, delivered not through forceful words or loud demonstrations, but through a calm, precise, and deliberate assertion of skill. The cafeteria was no longer a place of idle chatter or casual camaraderie. The atmosphere had shifted, permeated with awe, respect, and an unspoken understanding. The young recruits, who moments ago had been mocking a quiet woman in the corner, now sat in stunned silence. Conversations ceased mid-sentence. Forks hovered in midair. Eyes darted nervously toward the exit, where Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keaton had disappeared. What they had witnessed in 60 seconds was unlike anything they had imagined. It was a demonstration not of aggression, but of absolute mastery. Reed remained seated, his pride battered, his confidence shaken. He had been certain he could assert himself over the quiet newcomer, maybe even teach her a lesson in humility. Instead, he had learned something far more profound: respect could not be faked. Sarah had delivered a lesson in discipline, precision, and self-control that no manual or training guide could replicate. The room's whispers confirmed what he was beginning to accept. They had just encountered someone extraordinary. Around him, the other recruits were murmuring nervously. "She's a SEAL." "I can't believe it," one said, voice trembling slightly. Another added, "I heard she was involved in that Kandahar mission, the one that no one even talks about." Their awe was mingled with fear of being so utterly outclassed, but also a dawning admiration. In their minds, Sarah Keaton had transformed from a quiet, unassuming presence into a figure of legend in mere moments. The sergeant, who had remained silent through the chaos, now approached the cluster of stunned trainees. His voice was calm, but carried the weight of authority. "Gentlemen," he began, "you just experienced a glimpse of what it means to face a true operator. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Keaton is not here to intimidate. She is here to teach. And today, You learned that strength is measured not by bravado, but by control over yourself and the situation around you. The recruits nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson with growing respect. Reed's jaw tightened as he reflected on his own arrogance, realizing how small it had made him appear. He had thought he could mock someone quietly eating lunch and emerge victorious, but Sarah's calm authority had appended that assumption. He now understood that there were different kinds of power, some visible, some silent, and some so subtle that it left the untrained entirely unprepared. As Sarah exited the cafeteria, she moved with the precision and poise of someone who had trained for years under conditions that demanded absolute focus. Every step was deliberate, her posture perfect, her eyes scanning her environment with measured attention. There was no rush, no hint of exultation, no trace of arrogance. She carried herself like someone who had faced far worse challenges than a row of cocky recruits, and yet she had taken this opportunity to teach a quiet but unforgettable lesson. Her mind wandered briefly to the past, to the journey that had forged her into the operator she had become. She remembered the freezing sands and pounding surf of Coronado Beach, the site of basic underwater demolition SEAL BUD-DS training, the crucible where only the toughest survived. Every day had been an exercise in endurance and discipline. The cold water had bitten through her wetsuit, her hands blistered and torn from endless obstacle courses, and instructors shouted relentlessly at trainees who faltered. Many quit, most failed. She had endured. Each obstacle was a lesson in patience and perseverance. Crawling through cold sand, dragging heavy logs across the beach, enduring hours without rest, Sarah had been pushed to her absolute limits, physically and mentally. She remembered the moments when her body begged her to stop, when every muscle screamed in protest. And yet she refused. Pain was temporary, she reminded herself. Failure was permanent. Each test of endurance, each punishment endured in silence, built the foundation of the calm authority she now wielded effortlessly. Reed and the other recruits could not know the depth of experience behind Sarah's composure, but they were beginning to sense it. Every precise movement, every measured word, every calm glance in the cafeteria had been honed by years of impossible training, missions under fire, and countless challenges where failure was not an option. The brief confrontation had revealed the surface of her skill, but it was only a fraction of the mastery she carried silently within her. The sergeant continued to guide the recruits, now shifting the focus from shock to reflection. "What you saw was not just about controlling one man," he said, addressing Reed and the others directly. "It was about control over your environment, control over yourself, and the ability to assess and act decisively under pressure. You will face challenges where lives depend on those skills. Today was a lesson, and it will stick with you longer than any drill." The recruits listened intently, still absorbing the reality of the encounter. Reed's eyes lingered on the door, imagining her stepping across the base, training with her team, executing missions they could barely fathom. He felt a mixture of awe and humility. The lesson he had learned was profound. Skill and experience could never be faked, and silence could carry more authority than words or force. Sarah walked across the training yard, feeling the weight of her presence and the subtle impact she had left behind. She did not seek acknowledgement or praise. She understood the power of her actions, how a single encounter could shift perception, inspire respect, and teach discipline without raising a voice. The quiet force she embodied was a reflection of the lessons she had learned through years of grueling training and missions where failure meant death. She thought briefly about the young men in the cafeteria, about the lessons she had imparted, and about the ripple effect of respect. They would carry this memory forward, internalizing the idea that true strength was not loud or brash. It required patience, control, focus, and discipline, the very qualities that had carried her through the most dangerous moments of her career. Inside the cafeteria, Reed finally found his voice. I didn't know," he admitted quietly to his peers. She's not like anyone else here. He trailed off, searching for words. Another recruit finished for him. "She's a SEAL, and we just got a glimpse of what that really means." The group nodded, silently agreeing. A collective understanding had taken root. This was a person forged by unimaginable challenges, whose calm authority carried the weight of experience and danger that they could barely imagine. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the training base, the memory of those 60 seconds in the cafeteria settled like a stone in the minds of the young recruits. The impact was subtle, yet indelible. Sarah Keaton's calm, measured authority had left an imprint, one that would influence how they approached challenges, how they judged character, and how they understood the true nature of strength and discipline. 60 seconds had been enough to transform their understanding completely. It was a small encounter, yet the lesson was immense. Respect the quiet, never underestimate experience, and recognize that true mastery often resides in silence. Long before the cafeteria incident, long before any recruit had even heard her name, Sarah Keaton had faced a crucible that tested every fiber of her being. The sands of Coronado Beach stretched endlessly beneath her, cold and unforgiving, waves crashing relentlessly against the shore. It was here, at Basic Underwater Demolition SEAL, Bud S training, that she began the journey to become one of the most formidable operators in the Navy. The days started before sunrise, with a brutal combination of physical drills, mental endurance tests, and psychological pressures designed to break even the strongest recruits. Running through wet sand with logs heavier than themselves, swimming in frigid surf until muscles cramped and lungs burned, carrying teammates who could barely move under their weight, each moment demanded absolute focus. Sarah moved through it all with a singular goal in mind: survival. But survival was only the beginning. Mastery, control, and discipline were the true tests. Instructors screamed incessantly, their voices cutting through the cold morning air, testing every recruit's resolve. Every mistake, every hesitation was met with punishment: extra laps, push-ups, obstacle repetitions, or more creative forms of exhaustion that seemed designed to push the human body beyond natural limits. Many recruits fell behind. Many quit. Sarah felt the cold water bite at her body, the sand tear at her hands, but she pressed on, each step a conscious choice to endure. Pain was information, she reminded herself. Weakness had no place here. One of the most infamous challenges came during Hell Week, a grueling 5.5-day test of endurance, sleep deprivation, and sheer willpower. Recruits were pushed to the brink, continuously exhausted, barely able to keep their eyes open, yet forced to run, swim, and complete obstacle courses with no reprieve. Sarah's body screamed for rest, for relief, yet she refused. Every fiber of her being had been conditioned to ignore discomfort, to treat fatigue not as a barrier, but as a signal to focus harder, push further, and maintain control. In moments of extreme exhaustion, when the mind threatens to surrender, Sarah's inner discipline emerged. She compartmentalized pain, separating the physical from the mental. Her focus narrowed to what she could control: her movements, her breathing, and the task at hand. Every wave that crashed over her, every log dragged across the sand, every scream from instructors became a rhythm, a cadence she could anticipate and control. While others faltered under chaos, she found clarity. This clarity would later define her approach in high-stakes missions, allowing her to remain calm when chaos surrounded her. The camaraderie and competition of her fellow trainees also played a crucial role. There were moments of tension when recruits snapped at one another, frustration boiling over from exhaustion. But Sarah's leadership emerged quietly, not through words or force, but through example. She supported those struggling, silently offering guidance in movements, pacing, and endurance. Her presence was steady, unwavering, a calm anchor amid the storm. Others began to notice, often too late to question her competence. She was not only surviving, she was excelling, demonstrating skill and resilience that far outpaced the average trainee. There were moments that tested her resolve beyond physical endurance. Psychological trials, designed to break the mind, forced recruits into situations where fear, uncertainty, and discomfort threatened to overwhelm. Hypothermia drills, night swims in near-freezing water, and simulated combat scenarios demanded calm under conditions that would terrify most. Sarah's approach was methodical. She visualized each movement, anticipated each challenge, and treated fear as a tool rather than enemy. Where others panicked, she adapted. Where others hesitated, she acted. Graduation from Bud ES was not the culmination of physical achievement alone. It was a testament to mental fortitude and unyielding discipline. Standing on the beach at sunrise, with the waves crashing at her feet and the exhausted figures of her classmates around her, Sarah felt a sense of quiet triumph. She had endured every trial, mastered her body and mind, and emerged not only unbroken but stronger. The discipline she had forged here would define her career, shaping her into a silent operator capable of feats most could only imagine. But training was only the beginning. Sarah's skill was soon tested in operational deployments, where the stakes were far higher than any obstacle course or physical test. Her first missions placed her in hostile territories, where lives depended on split-second decisions, precise movements, and absolute calm under fire. Every skill honed on the beach, every lesson in endurance, and every moment of controlled pain became tools for survival and mission success. The quiet authority she wielded in the cafeteria was born here, forged in cold water, endless sand, and the relentless pursuit of mastery. It was this combination of physical skill, mental discipline, and unshakable calm that allowed her to operate with effectiveness and precision. She became known among her peers not for loud commands or aggression, but for silent authority and unwavering control. Orders were followed, plans executed, and missions completed because of the respect she commanded, not demanded. Her calm, deliberate actions inspired confidence in her team, a quality often more valuable than the most advanced equipment or weaponry. Reflecting on those early days, Sarah recognized that every grueling obstacle, every scream of frustration, and every night spent in exhaustion had prepared her for moments like the cafeteria confrontation. There, in the presence of recruits who underestimated her, she relied on the foundation built during Bud S and countless operational missions. Her calm, controlled response, turning potential conflict into an unspoken lesson, was a direct extension of her training. In 60 seconds, she demonstrated more about leadership, discipline, and respect than months of classroom instruction could have achieved. As she walked toward the training grounds after the cafeteria encounter, Sarah allowed herself a brief, almost imperceptible smile. The recruits had learned a lesson that would stay with them for years. Strength is not measured by volume or aggression. It is measured by control, precision, and the ability to act decisively when it matters most. The discipline that had been forged in the cold surf and sand of Coronado Beach had once again proven its value, not in a battlefield thousands of miles away, but in the quiet, unlikely setting of a naval cafeteria. Her past, the pain endured, the exhaustion faced, the victories earned, was the invisible armor that allowed her to navigate the present with quiet authority. Every trainee who had witnessed the interaction had glimpsed just a fragment of that legacy. They could not yet understand the countless hours of preparation, the near impossible challenges faced, or the missions undertaken in silence and secrecy. But they felt it, and that was enough to inspire awe, respect, and ultimately, a lesson that would not soon be forgotten. The sun hung low in the sky as Sarah reached the edge of the training grounds. The obstacles and firing ranges stretched out before her, awaiting the next phase of instruction. She inhaled deeply, savoring the moment of calm, knowing that each day offered new opportunities to lead, to teach, and to demonstrate the principles she had lived by for years. Discipline, control, endurance, and quiet strength, the elements that had forged her into a Navy SEAL, were her constant companions, and they would guide her in every challenge yet to come. 60 seconds in a cafeteria had revealed only a glimpse of her abilities. The foundation of her power, however, had been laid in countless hours of pain, perseverance, and relentless pursuit of mastery. This was the fire that forged her, the crucible that shaped her, and the legacy that would continue to influence those around her long after the echoes of the lunchroom confrontation had faded. The desert sun burned overhead, relentless and unforgiving, as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Caton crouched behind a ridge overlooking a narrow mountain pass in Afghanistan. The air was thin, dry, and tense, carrying the scent of dust and danger. Her team of SEAL operators moved silently behind her, each aware of the stakes and the lethal precision required. Operation Silent Dagger was designed to intercept a high-value target, but the mission had already veered off plan. Intelligence had been incomplete. The enemy had anticipated their approach. They were walking into an ambush. Sarah's eyes scanned the terrain, analyzing every rock, every shadow, every potential vantage point. Years of training brewed countless operational deployments, mental conditioning, had sharpened her perception to a razor's edge. She could anticipate enemy movement before it happened, predict the flow of combat, and make split-second decisions that meant the difference between life and death. Her team's trust in her was absolute, built on countless missions where hesitation could have been fatal. As the first gunshots echoed from below, chaos erupted. Enemy combatants poured fire from hidden positions, their rifles spitting bullets that tore through the thin desert air. 2 of Sarah's operators took cover behind jagged rocks, but the ambush was coordinated, precise, and deadly. She counted silently, assessed the threats, and issued terse, precise commands. Every word carried authority without hesitation. Move left flank. Suppress and advance. Eyes on me. Her calm presence anchored the team amid the chaos. Panic had no place here. Fear had no place here. Only focus. Only action. A sudden explosion threw sand and debris into the air. One operator screamed as a foot was hit, the terrain treacherous and unrelenting. Sarah sprinted across the open ground without hesitation, her boots kicking up dust, her movements controlled and precise. She reached the wounded teammate, assessed quickly, and hoisted him onto her back. Every step was calculated, every muscle coordinated for maximum efficiency. The bullets whizzed past, grazing rocks where her team would have been exposed, yet she never faltered. Her team followed her lead, drawing suppressive fire while maneuvering towards safer positions. Sarah's mind was a whirlwind of calculations, trajectories, cover, timing, enemy positions, her team's stamina, extraction points. She gave commands concisely, calmly, each one executed flawlessly. Her presence was a beacon of certainty in the storm of violence. Every operator knew instinctively that survival depended on following her lead. Hesitation could kill them all. The ambush lasted minutes that felt like hours. Sarah moved tirelessly, providing cover fire, coordinating her team, and ensuring no one was left behind. Her breathing remained steady, her gaze unbroken, her focus absolute. She had trained for scenarios like this countless times on Coronado Beach, in obstacle courses, and during live fire exercises, but the reality of combat was sharper, more brutal, and unforgiving. The lessons from Bud S. and her earlier deployments coalesced into instinctual action. Hours seemed to pass in the chaos. Sarah carried the wounded operator to cover, then signaled another team member to flank the remaining enemy forces. Precision, timing, and discipline turned the tide. Slowly, methodically, the SEAL team neutralized the ambush, moving with lethal efficiency. Not a single team member was lost. Lives were saved because of her calm decisiveness under pressure, her ability to read the terrain, the enemy, and her own operators simultaneously. After the dust settled, Sarah's team gathered at a concealed point for extraction. Sweat and blood stained their uniforms. Exhaustion weighed heavy on every body. Yet there was relief, not panic. There was recognition, not doubt. Each operator understood that their survival was a direct result of Sarah's leadership and skill. She had taken control of chaos and turned near-certain disaster into success. The medals she would earn afterward, though rarely worn publicly, reflected her unwavering commitment to mission and team. Her mind, however, had already shifted from reflection to analysis. Each encounter, each ambush, each critical decision was reviewed, stored, and internalized. She understood that perfection was never guaranteed in the field. There were always variables, surprises, and unknowns. That constant vigilance, the ability to anticipate and adapt without hesitation, was what separated legends from novices. Her calm demeanor in the cafeteria had been the same principle distilled into 60 seconds. Control, precision, and quiet authority. Back at the base, word of Operation Silent Dagger spread quietly among higher-ranking officers. They did not boast about the specifics, the risks, the ambush, the split-second decisions, but within the community, Sarah's actions were recognized and respected. Her team had survived, the mission objectives had been accomplished, and her leadership had been flawless under conditions that would have broken most operators. For her, the recognition was secondary. The focus was always on the mission and the team. It was moments like these that forged the legend of Sarah Keaton. In high-pressure situations, where fear could paralyze and hesitation could be fatal, she remained calm, precise, and decisive. These were the qualities that allowed her to operate as a SEAL, to lead, and to survive. They were the same qualities that would later allow her to command. Respect in a seemingly ordinary setting, a naval cafeteria, without raising her voice or demonstrating unnecessary force. Sarah often reflected on the link between training and reality. The grueling hours on Coronado Beach, the punishments endured, the psychological tests of buddies, all of it had prepared her for moments like Silent Dagger. She had learned to trust her instincts, her training, and her team. Every element of her life had been designed to create control from chaos. And whether in the mountains of Afghanistan or a lunchroom filled with recruits, the principles remained the same: calm, discipline, and authority through mastery. When the dust finally settled on the mission, Sarah walked alone to survey the terrain. The mountains stretched endlessly, shadows lengthening with the setting sun. Her team gathered behind her, debriefing quietly, knowing that her presence had guided them safely through the most dangerous moments of their careers. She allowed herself a brief moment of satisfaction, but not pride, not celebration. There was always more to learn, more to teach, more challenges to face. Her calm authority was not a shield for ego. It was a tool to ensure survival, respect, and success. 60 seconds in a cafeteria had revealed a glimpse of her abilities to untrained eyes. Operation Silent Dagger had revealed the depth of her mastery to those who had witnessed it firsthand. Precision under fire, leadership in chaos, and calm control in life or death situations. Both moments, one small and subtle, the other explosive and deadly, shared the same principle. True strength is quiet, deliberate, and earned through discipline, training, and experience. As Sarah returned to base that evening, she felt the familiar weight of responsibility settle over her shoulders. Her team was safe, the mission had been a success, and the lessons of the day would resonate for years. Yet even in moments of triumph, she focused not on accolades or recognition, but on preparation for the next challenge. Calm, disciplined, and precise, that was the essence of her being, forged in fire, tested in battle, and demonstrated in every interaction, no matter how small or large. The following morning, the naval base awakened to the familiar sounds of boots striking concrete, the metallic clatter of trays in the cafeteria, and the low hum of early chatter among recruits. But the atmosphere had shifted. Every young operator in training remembered the quiet woman who had transformed 60 seconds into a lifetime lesson. They whispered her name, Sarah Keaton, with a mixture of awe, curiosity, and trepidation. Some were still trying to reconcile her calm authority with the chaos she had commanded in Operation Silent Dagger, which had quietly circulated as classified lore among officers. Reed was among them, his posture straighter, his eyes sharper, his mind sharper still. He remembered the sting of humiliation, the lesson delivered silently, and the flood of admiration that followed. It had been a turning point, one he couldn't ignore. He had learned in the cafeteria that respect could not be demanded, only earned, and that quiet strength often held more weight than bluster or bravado. Today, however, Sarah was not just a presence to be observed. She was a mentor to be engaged, a living embodiment of the principles they were training to embody themselves. Sarah appeared at the edge of the training field just as the first rays of the sun pierced the morning fog. Her uniform was immaculate, her movements precise, her eyes scanning the recruits with the same calm attention she had displayed during the infamous lunchroom encounter. The group had gathered in the center of the yard, standing at attention, yet their nerves were palpable. This was not just a training session. It was an opportunity to absorb lessons from someone whose mastery had been proven in the most extreme circumstances imaginable. Today, she began, her voice calm but carrying the weight of authority. You will learn that strength, discipline, and focus are not concepts you read about. They are practices you live, breathe, and demonstrate in every action, every decision, and every interaction. Her eyes swept the group, pausing on recruits whose earlier arrogance had been most evident. Reed felt the weight of her gaze, a mixture of challenge and expectation. There was no intimidation in her tone, yet every word carried an unspoken authority that demanded attention. The first exercise was deceptively simple, movement through an obstacle course under strict observation. But the lesson was subtle. Do not race, Sarah instructed. Do not compete against each other. Compete against yourself. Every misstep, every hesitation, every wasted motion is an opportunity to learn control and efficiency. The recruits exchanged uncertain glances. They had expected drills that pushed their muscles to the limit, but Sarah's emphasis was not on speed or brute force. It was on precision, control, and conscious awareness. Reed followed her instructions carefully, noting how her guidance extended beyond technique. She moved silently alongside the recruits, observing body posture, breathing, hand placement, and footwork. Corrections were given in quiet, deliberate tones. Shift your weight here, she would say. Engage your core. Control your pace. There were no raised voices, no humiliation. Yet the impact of her corrections was immediate. Every trainee became aware of errors they had not previously noticed, flaws that might have gone unchecked for months under traditional instruction. The next phase of training introduced the mental aspect, situational awareness exercises. Recruits were placed in environments designed to simulate high-stress, high-stakes situations. Loud noises, distractions, and confusing terrain challenged their focus. Sarah moved among them, silent and observant, occasionally adjusting posture, offering small, precise corrections. Her calm presence was a constant anchor. Where panic might have taken root, her demeanor provided clarity. Where hesitation might have occurred, her subtle interventions restored focus. During a particularly intense simulation, Reed found himself faltering, overwhelmed by multiple simultaneous distractions. Sarah's hand on his shoulder, firm but gentle, grounded him. "Breathe, observe, prioritize," she instructed quietly. "Everything you see is data. Process it, then act. Reacting without understanding is how mistakes are made." Her words were simple, yet each syllable carried the weight of experience gained through countless missions and grueling training. Reed's focus sharpened immediately. He adjusted his stance, recalibrated his attention, and completed the task successfully. Sarah's lessons extended beyond physical drills. She emphasized character, decision-making, and the subtleties of leadership. "Leadership is not authority," she explained during a briefing session. "It is the ability to inspire confidence, instill discipline, and guide others through uncertainty. Command without respect is meaningless. Power without control is dangerous. Your goal is not to be feared, but to be trusted. Trust is earned in small actions, repeated consistently." The recruits listened, some nodding, some silently absorbing, all realizing that they were witnessing principles in action, not just theory. One of the most significant exercises involved team coordination under stress. Recruits were divided into squads and tasked with navigating complex terrain while managing limited resources. Success depended on collaboration, communication, and maintaining composure under pressure. Sarah observed silently at first, allowing the recruits to make mistakes and learn organically. When intervention was required, she acted decisively but unobtrusively, demonstrating the subtle art of guidance. A misplaced command, a hesitant movement, or a misjudged decision could mean failure. Sarah showed how calm, precise leadership transformed potential chaos into coordinated success. Throughout the day, the recruits began to internalize the lessons Sarah imparted. They saw firsthand the impact of calm authority, disciplined focus, and attention to detail. They realized that respect was earned not through force or ego, but through competence, consistency, and measured action. Reed, once cocky and impatient, now mirrored her composure, consciously correcting his movements and thought processes. Others followed suit, the collective energy of the group shifting from uncertain confidence to controlled competence. Sarah concluded the day with one final exercise, a reflection session at the edge of the training grounds. The sun had dipped low, casting long shadows across the sand and obstacles. "Remember," she said, her voice calm and deliberate, "everything you do matters. Every decision, every action, every word carries weight. True strength is quiet, precise, and deliberate. Master yourself first. Then you can master anything around you." Her gaze lingered on each recruit for a brief moment, ensuring her message had resonated. For Reed and his peers, the lessons of the day went far beyond drills or tactical exercises. They had learned about humility, focus, and leadership. They had witnessed discipline forged in fire, applied not in combat alone, but in every interaction. They understood that mastery was not demonstrated through volume or aggression, but through control, composure, and consistent excellence. As the recruits filed back to the barracks, whispers of admiration and reflection spread among them. Sarah walked behind them, silent and observant, satisfied that the seed of understanding had been planted. The legacy she carried, the combination of grueling training, operational experience, and unshakable composure, was now filtering into the minds of the next generation. In 60 seconds in a cafeteria, she had demonstrated authority. In hours of mentoring, she had instilled understanding. Both were equally important, both necessary, both enduring. The sun set, bathing the base in warm golden light. The day had been long, exhausting, and transformative. Recruits carried with them not only fatigue, but clarity, respect, and insight. And somewhere in the quiet, deliberate presence of Sarah Keaton, they glimpsed the essence of true mastery, calm under pressure, authority earned through skill, and discipline applied consistently. The sun had risen higher over the naval base, casting long, sharp shadows across the obstacle courses, firing ranges, and open fields where recruits moved in precise formations. The events of the past days, especially the unforgettable lunchroom, confrontation, and the subsequent training exercises, had left a permanent mark on the minds of every trainee. Sarah Keaton's presence was no longer a novelty. It had become a benchmark, a standard by which all recruits now measured themselves. Reed walked across the yard, his movements deliberate and controlled, reflecting the lessons Sarah had instilled. He thought back to that moment in the cafeteria, the 60 seconds that had upended his pride and reshaped his understanding of strength. He remembered her calm, measured response, the subtle but complete command of the situation, and the lesson that authority came not from loudness or bravado, but from mastery and restraint. That moment had sparked a transformation in him, and the exercises that followed had only deepened it. The recruits had learned to observe, analyze, and act with intention. No longer were they impulsive or reactive. Sarah's mentorship had taught them to value precision over speed, calm over panic, and teamwork over individual glory. The mental shift was profound. Even the most competitive trainees now recognized that their success depended not solely on physical strength, but on discipline, awareness, and the ability to maintain composure under pressure. Sarah herself walked among them silently, her eyes scanning every movement, every posture, every expression. She offered guidance only when necessary, correcting a stance here, adjusting a handhold there, always with calm precision. Her presence was not intimidating. It was instructive, a quiet force that shaped behavior without demand or force. She understood that mastery was not demonstrated through dominance, but through influence, consistency, and the ability to inspire confidence in others. Later, as the recruits gathered for a debriefing, the weight of the day's lessons became clear. Sarah addressed them, her voice calm yet commanding attention. "You have learned much in a short time," she said, "but the true measure of what you've absorbed will not come from drills or exercises. It will come from how you apply discipline, focus, and judgment when it matters most, when stakes are high, when uncertainty surrounds you, and when lives depend on your decisions." Her words were not mere platitudes. They were distilled wisdom, born from countless hours of grueling BD's training, the crucible of combat operations, and years of teaching others to thrive under pressure. Each recruit understood that the principles she taught, patience, control, awareness, and calm authority, were not just tactical skills. They were life skills, essential for survival in and out of combat. The memory of Operation Silent Dagger lingered in Sarah's mind as she spoke. She had survived ambushes, guided her team through chaos, and made split-second decisions that saved lives. She had endured pain, exhaustion, and fear, learning to channel them into clarity and decisive action. Those experiences informed every instruction she gave, every correction she offered, and every subtle demonstration of control. The recruits saw only the surface, the calm, precise, authoritative figure, but beneath it lay years of preparation and experience, invisible yet palpable in every word and gesture. Reed listened intently, the lessons sinking deeper than any physical training could have achieved. He realized that the cafeteria confrontation had been a microcosm of Sarah's broader philosophy. Discipline was not punishment. Authority was not intimidation. Strength was not force. True mastery involved control over oneself, awareness of one's environment, and the ability to guide others with subtlety and precision. The revelation reshaped his approach to training, leadership, and even personal interactions. As the day drew to a close, Sarah gathered the recruits for one final exercise, designed not to test their strength or speed, but their judgment and teamwork. They were faced with a simulated crisis scenario, complex and high stakes, requiring communication, collaboration, and calm under pressure. As they worked together, applying lessons learned under Sarah's guidance, her presence was a quiet anchor. She intervened only when necessary, allowing them to fail, learn, and adapt, understanding that mastery was cultivated through experience, not spoon-fed instruction. By the end of the exercise, the transformation was evident. Trainees who had once been brash, impulsive, or dismissive now moved with purpose, communicated with clarity, and executed strategies with disciplined precision. Reed, in particular, noted the change within himself. Patience replaced arrogance, observation replaced assumption, and respect replaced underestimation. Sarah's mentorship had fundamentally altered their approach to challenges, instilling lessons that would remain long after they left the base. As the recruits dispersed, whispers of admiration spread quietly. "She's incredible," one said. "I've never seen anyone handle situations like that," another murmured. They had witnessed the power of quiet authority, the depth of experience behind her calm demeanor, and the way mastery inspired confidence without force. Sarah's legend had become tangible, not just in stories or videos, but in lived experience. Sarah remained for a few moments longer, watching the sunset over the training grounds. She reflected on the journey that had brought her here, from the icy surf of Coronado Beach to the deserts of Afghanistan, from grueling Bud S training to mentoring the next generation of naval operators. Every challenge had shaped her, every trial had honed her discipline, and every mission had reinforced the principle that true strength was measured not in noise or aggression, but in control, composure, and the ability to inspire respect. The recruit's transformation was the living testament to her legacy. They had witnessed firsthand what it meant to lead without ego, to teach without force, and to demonstrate mastery through calm authority. The 60 seconds in the cafeteria had been the spark, her training and operational experience the fuel, and her mentorship the guiding flame. By the end of the week, her lessons had become ingrained in their approach, leaving an enduring impression that would shape their careers, their decisions, and their understanding of true strength. Sarah finally turned and walked back toward the base, the evening air cool against her skin. There was no fanfare, no recognition sought or needed. The impact of her presence was already evident in the recruits' disciplined movements, thoughtful decisions, and quiet confidence. Her legacy was not written in medals or headlines, but in the transformation she had catalyzed in those she guided. 60 seconds in a lunchroom had revealed a glimpse of her capabilities. Hours of mentoring had solidified understanding. Years of training and combat experience had forged mastery. Together, these moments demonstrated the essence of Sarah Keaton. Calm, disciplined, and precise, a Navy SEAL whose quiet strength left an indelible mark on everyone she encountered. As the base settled into the calm of night, the recruits carried her lessons forward. Each decision, each action, each interaction would be shaped by the example she had set. The memory of the quiet woman who had commanded respect without raising her voice, who had demonstrated authority through skill and calm presence, would endure as a guiding principle in their development as operators, leaders, and individuals. Sarah Keaton had become more than a SEAL. She had become a standard, a benchmark, and a teacher whose influence extended far beyond missions or drills. Her quiet authority, earned through years of grueling training, honed in combat, and demonstrated in everyday moments, had transformed ordinary recruits into disciplined, focused, and capable operators. The legend was not in the stories told later, it was in the lives she had shaped, the respect she had earned, and the mastery she embodied in every movement, every decision, every moment.